We got tea, we got cameras, and we got questions. What's up, guys? Welcome to another questionable photography podcast. I think that's what I'm going to call this. I'm going to start a podcast and call it the Questionable Photography Podcast. But for right now, this is just basically like some Q&A like normal. I've been getting a lot of questions lately. And it's all the same question. As I'm sure most of you know, why you're here is because the R3 has been kind of officially announced, and there's been a few videos online and all the specs and everything. And that, of course, has led to a lot of questions from you guys asking me if I'm going to upgrade and what I think about the R3 and all of that. So we're going to go over all of that stuff today because I have some thoughts, have some preliminary thoughts. Obviously, I don't have it. I am not anyone of significance, but I do have a lot of experience. So I am just going to kind of talk about what I think and give you guys my thoughts on the R3 and whether or not I'm going to upgrade and whether or not maybe you should consider upgrading too, and some things to think about. Wow, this chair is really amucked. I think my son was in here playing video games last night. There we go. Okay. So the R3's out. First off, I'm just going to say they're probably, if you came here to see like negative stuff, you're in the wrong channel. I'm not a negative person. Even if I did have anything negative to say, I probably wouldn't say it, or I'd find a way to say it nicely. That reminds me of a movie. If you know that movie, comment below. So that being said, first off, I do think the R3 is amazing. From everything that I've seen from it, I think that it looks amazing, it sounds amazing. The couple videos that I saw, I watched Gordon Lang's video and it was incredible. Watched Jared Poland's video, and he did a lot of great things with it in the time he had. And of course, I watched Peter's, but not much going on there in terms of info. But it was great. Everything was great. Great. So let's talk about a couple specs real quick. I think most people are focusing on a few aspects of the R3 and they're overlooking some of the other aspects. So right off the bat, I think most people are focused on things like the 30 frames per second, the new eye autofocus thingy, and the car tracking. Those are all kind of real heavy hitters with the specs. And rightly so. I mean, that's amazing, but there are some other things, and I think people are also obsessed kind of with the only 24 megapixel. If you guys have ever seen my R6 versus R5 videos, you probably know that megapixels, I'm just gonna say, they're great. I have an R5, and I have it for that reason, but they are not the end-all be-all of photography amazing things, so just keep that in mind moving forward, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more. So I just got back from my morning. It's like 7:34 right now. It's early in the morning. I get up pretty early in the fall and I go for my wildlife walks, and I'm always looking for elk and deer and all that kind of stuff around my neighborhood. Just got me to thinking while I was out this morning, and then looking over all of the messages from you guys. There seems to be a distinct lack of information or interest or talking points about the R3 for wildlife specifically. And Canon is definitely gearing this towards a sports centric photographers and that sort of thing, especially really high-end sports and photojournalists and people who need the speed, people who don't need the megapixels, that kind of stuff. And traditionally, I think one of the reasons why I'm getting a lot of questions, me personally, from some of you guys, I think is because, you know, I am a wildlife photographer. Among many other things, I'm also a sports photographer, an adventure photographer, landscape photographer, time-lapse photographer, portrait photographer. You know, I mean, I do it all. But, you know, a lot of you guys know me for my wildlife. You know, that's becoming a much bigger thing on my channel. I think maybe I'll just jump into my answer to y'all's question about if I'm going to upgrade, and then we'll talk about the things that I'm personally thinking about when I'm looking at a camera to upgrade versus what I personally have now, and then maybe, you know, give you some advice for the same things. So am I going to upgrade to the R3? No. And that the simplest reason for that answer is price. I can't afford it right now. I I could potentially, you know, take a little bit out of savings, and I could potentially sell one of my cameras, you know, and then try to compromise, you know, and make some sacrifices and stuff like that. You know, I've got an R5 and an R6. The first thing that crossed my mind was, well, and the first thing that probably crossed a lot of people's mind is, well, is it worth the upgrade from an R5? I have an R5. I could still sell the R5 for well over $3,000, or at least around $3,000. It's in good condition. It's still in high demand, you know, and that would take half. That's half right off the bat. And at that point, I probably could afford the extra $3,000 to. I could probably scrape that up to pick up an R3. But to me, that's not worth it. And let's start off with why. For obviously the first reason is megapixels. You know, I just said that megapixels are not, you know, kind of a big deal or anything. However, depending on what you do, you know, megapixels certainly can be important. And I'm also a landscape, time-lapse, portrait photographer, all that stuff. All of those things where megapixels really matter, and wildlife. And I finally have my high resolution camera, my R5, and I'm not going to give it up anytime soon. So, you know, I like my 45 megapixels, and I like the 8K. And I know a lot of people look down on the 8K and all of that stuff, but I use it for very specific purposes. I use it for wildlife, and it's very, very handy for me. And I'm not ready to give that up. So the R5, trading in the R5 is out of the question, and that's sadly the most money that I could, you know, knock off of that price. So let's talk about the autofocus for a minute. If you're thinking about upgrading to an R3 from whatever you have, let's assume you have an R5 or an R6, both of which have the same autofocus system. From everything that I've seen from Gordon's video and Jared's video, and you know, from reading the stuff online, people that actually have it, the autofocus system looks amazing. The IAF, I think that's going to be amazing. I'm curious to see how it's going to work for wildlife and what wildlife situations I could practically use that in. I have also heard from the very little bit that I've seen, there was one, I think as of now, there's like one video that Canon Asia put out, and it's like 3 minutes long. It's on YouTube, about a wildlife photographer. It seemed very scripted though. It seemed like he was reading a script. Although he may have had to, because English did not sound like his first language. So maybe he was just reading it to be fluent in English. Either way, I don't know how authentic that was in terms of his experience with it, but he was a wildlife photographer, and he did say that the autofocus, the traditional, the IAF, specifically for the animals, works better in the R3 than it does in the R5 and the R6. And if that's true, that alone is going to be a huge upgrade, because the way that I have it set up, like I've said before, like once you have it set up right, and the way that works best for you with the animal IAF, like right out the gate, the animal IAF kind of sucks, you know, but once you get it dialed in and figure out the settings and how to use it and how to turn it off and how to turn it on very quickly, in the R5 and the R6, it's been absolutely amazing, and it's been a game changer for me. And I would personally never look back. I would never look forward to another camera that doesn't have that. And if the R3s does better than the R5 and the R6, I will be very, very happy about that. So let's talk about a couple of other things that have piqued my interest. So concerning the shutter rate, 30 frames per second is amazing. For everyone that I've talked to that has an A1 has been blown away with the 30 megapixels, and of course that A1 is 30 megapixels or 30 frames per second with much higher. I think the A1 has something like 50 megapixels or something. I mean, that's insane to move that much data, and the R3 is not going to be doing that. However, the slight difference is, and this is one of the reasons why I haven't shot in electronic shutter mode very much. So I want to talk about that for a second. The R5 has the electronic shutter, and the R6, and they can do 20 frames per second in high burst mode in electronic shutter. There are a couple of reasons why I've kind of typically steer away from that with wildlife if I can help it. So the first, and they're not deal breakers for sure. I mean, I could shoot in the electronic shutter all day long and my images will come out fine for the most part. Just a couple of little things, like when you're shooting with a mechanical shutter and you're shooting 12 frames a second or whatever it is, you're getting that 14-bit image. And then in order to get the 20 frames per second in the electronic shutter, the R5 will drop down slightly to the 12-bit image. So you're losing just that tiny little bit of data there. And then the other thing with the R5 and the R6 that they're both really bad with, they suffer a lot from rolling shutter. So at super high shutter speeds, especially when you're panning with a bird or whatever, I mean, there's a good chance if that bird is vertical that you're going to see some bent wings. If there's trees or a post or buildings or whatever in the background and they're vertical, there's a good chance that they're not going to be vertical. They're going to be very, very angled. And that's the rolling shutter problem. And from what I've seen from the couple videos that I watched with Gordon Lang and Jared Polin, they did show a much more improved electronic shutter mode, and so much so that they said that the R3 is even by default put into electronic shutter mode because they're just assuming that if you're buying an R3, you want that 30 frames per second and that silent shutter and all that stuff. So the R3 also, so it doesn't have nearly as bad rolling shutter, and from what I've heard, again, it is moving that data at it's lossless, so it's still at 14 bits. And I mean, if that's true, then that's absolutely amazing. And those couple of things right there that kind of keep me out of electronic shutter mode on the R5, unless I really need to, unless I need to be silent. I know my shutter speed's not going to be super fast. I know I'm not going to be whip panning around. Then yeah, I'll still shoot an electronic shutter and it'll be great because it's super nice for wildlife to have the ability to stay very quiet, But for my purposes, on the still side, again, having never used an R3 yet, I can't say that it has anything that I personally or professionally couldn't live without. And that's a big factor for upgrading moving forward. Am I getting clients? Am I getting work? Or am I trying to achieve some image or artistic thing that my current cameras are limiting me from? And I think that's very important to ask yourself. The answer for me is no. There's nothing that I can't do. There's nothing that my clients are asking for that I can't do with my R5 and my R6 right now. Except for when I do the cinematic stuff, when I rent, if a client needs something with a specific camera, then I'll rent the specific camera. And that's how the R3 is going to be for me as well. If a client needs something that camera can do that these two can't, or that it can do better, then I will just rent it. Now let's talk about some reasons why I really, really want the R3. And I think these are the things that a lot of people aren't thinking about or didn't realize just because it's so new in the announcements. But after I watched Gordon Lang's video, and he did all the video, so he did all the video comparisons and talked about the new video features, and that's something that I had glazed over too, because I, again, like everybody else, I was kind of more focused on all of the fancy new stuff on the stills side. But as a hybrid shooter, as someone who runs a photography and videography business, as someone who is a YouTuber, and as someone who films a lot, and I switch between video and stills like immediately, constantly, and a lot. Like I'll be taking pictures of wildlife and then I'll switch immediately to video and then be filming the wildlife. Same thing with sports and adventure and all of that stuff. So the video aspect to me is a big deal. And what Gordon showed was very interesting in that the R3 has, it seems to be a much improved video on a lot of the levels. So I mean, the comparisons he did between the R5 and the R6 for the 1080p and the 4K and all that stuff, the R3 was really edging it out. And the only thing that can't be touched at this point still is the R5's 8K, and I'm not willing to give up the 8K, and of course that looks better than anything else. But you know, I was really surprised by the video improvements. They put the switch back on the back of the screen to switch between stills and video that the 5D4 and the 1DX2 and 1DX3 have. And I absolutely love that. And for a wildlife photographer, for a sports photographer, for a photojournalist, I think that will be a huge deal moving forward, and very handy. Not just having the toggle switchback, but having all of these other customizable buttons. I think it's going to make it really powerful. And then the R3 being able to do the 6K RAW, having the C-Log 3. You know, we got the C-Log 3 finally in the R5, but it took them a long time. Like it's only been, I think, a couple of months since we've had that update. And we also have C-Log, the original C-Log, which I never use. I don't like. I prefer the C-Log 3. And like when you use cinema cameras and stuff, the Canon cinema cameras, you're typically going to be using with C-Log 3. You're not going to be using C-Log, the regular C-Log. So the fact that they put that in there definitely means that they're kind of serious about video, that they've done the 6K RAW and put the C-Log 3 in there. The fact that they put the flippy screen on the R3, all of those things are really telling me that they're kind of being a little more serious about video now, and I'm pretty stoked on that moving forward. That longer, oh, that's the thing that Gordon tested that I was blown away by. Canon has finally gotten rid of that stupid arbitrary 30-minute record limit, and that's what drove me nuts. I mean, just a second ago, I just hit that limit when I was recording, and I had to, and it stopped like mid-sentence, and I had to go back and turn it back on and think, what did I just say, and backtrack and cut and, you know, do all that stuff. And so he recorded for 2.5 hours, or 2 hours 12 minutes or something like that, on one full battery, which is great. And then he plugged into USB-C power source and he recorded for 6 hours, and apparently the record time for the R3 is going to be 6 hours, and that was in 4K, the regular 4K 24-25p. That is what I'm very excited about. That right there, combined with the C-Log 3, combined with the Pro, the 6K RAW, that all tells me that the Canon is being kind of serious about video. And I personally would really, really like to upgrade my R6 to the R3 for that reason alone. But sadly, like I said in the beginning of the video, that's not going to happen unless I get a big windfall and somebody drops a ton of money in my lap that isn't going to go back into my house remodeling or fixing my car or traveling or buying my 13-year-old son new pants because he grows every 10 seconds. You know, so like any big chunk of money that I get usually has a lot of other places that it's going towards in my life that are pulling towards it. So that big of a chunk, sadly, is not going to be going to an R3 anytime soon. One last thing, concerning the R3 for wildlife, I mean, it's going to be a monster for wildlife. People haven't been focused on it because, again, the low megapixel, but as I've seen with my 1DX1, my 1DC, my 1DX2, and my R6, I can personally tell you that I've gotten amazing shots that I'm very happy with, that clients have been very happy with, that a lot of you guys on YouTube have been very happy with, all with those low megapixel cameras. I've printed them out huge. So my thing is like, don't be obsessed with the megapixels. They're not the end of the world. I am curious if the R3 is going to have a crop mode like the R5 and the R6 do. I actually do still surprisingly use the crop mode on the R6 if I have it and I need it. And that's just to help me focus a little better if something's really far away. So I am kind of curious. I mean, that drops it down to like an 8 megapixel image or something, but again, it's still printable up to a decent amount, and it's definitely still usable on the interwebs and the social medias. And then the R3 having 4 more megapixels, still, I think it's going to be fine for all intents and purposes. So just don't get carried away with those megapixels. If you are seriously considering upgrading to the R3, think about the things that are really going to help you, and if that's necessary. If you're coming from an R5 or an R6, yes, the autofocus system is probably going to be slightly better. Yes, the battery is going to be better. It's going to push harder. It's going to drive more. You're going to have a little more FPS, all of that kind of stuff. You're going to have those improvements with the electronic shutter. But are all of those, again, I just drill this home, are all of those worth the price that they're asking to you personally? So just keep those in mind. And don't be, if all of those are a yes and everything's a yes, but the only thing that's holding you back, and I say this with anything, I say a lot of people looking at the differences between the R5 and the R6 saying, I really want the R5. Well, do you want it because it's just hyped and it is the best out there and everybody loves the 45 megapixels and blah, blah, or do you want it because you really need it? And that's a big difference. And a lot of people I turn on to the R6 because it's amazing. It's got the same autofocus system, and it's actually slightly better in low light, which I love, and it's just an incredible camera. So they're saving a lot of money by getting 95+% of the performance in an R6 versus an R5, and that's going to be kind of the same thing here, is you're going to save a lot of money with going with an R5 or even an R6 if you don't have either one of those, versus an R3. The R3 is very specialized. It's for a very certain type of people. Most people won't need the things that it offers, and most people will be very happy with an R5 until potentially an R1 comes out. But again, what I say, people ask me about, should I wait for an R7 or should I wait for the R3 or an R1 or whatever? No, if you're thinking about upgrading because you need to upgrade for some reason, if something is holding you back now, do not wait, because you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know what you're going to miss out between now and then, whatever alleged camera comes out. The R7 is a myth. I highly doubt it's coming at all, and people that are holding out for that are just ridiculous. Like all of that time, you could be getting something right now that's amazing. And that's how it is with the R3. If you need it, but you can't afford it, but you can afford something like an R5 or an R6, then consider that, because again, 90-something% of the performance for half the price or less, And it's really easy to get caught up on the hype. Like I'm caught up on the hype. I've been watching all the videos, I've been reading all the blogs, all the press releases, all the forums, all of that stuff. I do that. I'm a gearhead. I love gear. I'm obsessed with it. I'm interested in it, and I want the R6 and I want the R3 very badly, like I've said, but I'm not going to get it, and I have the ability to calm that hype down and think rationally about why do I want it just because of the hype? Do I want it because there's something that it can do that I just absolutely can't live without? And that's what you have to ask yourself. So that was my extremely long thoughts on a camera that is coming out that I don't have, that I'm not planning on buying, that I want to buy, and that I will probably rent at some point. So I hope that it helps you maybe in some way. Just think about things. It's tea time. It's second breakfast time. I'm starving. If you have any questions about the R3 that you think I might be able to answer, or questions about the stuff that you know I can answer, then you can definitely leave those in the comments below, and I will most likely answer them. So thanks for watching. I will see you, if you enjoyed this video, if it helped you out at all, you should definitely hit the like button, because that's the best thing you can do for my channel, and I super appreciate it. And if you're new here and you made it this far, that's absolutely amazing, and I love you. And you should probably subscribe and go check out some of my actual videos where I'm actually doing stuff, because that's most of my videos. I actually do stuff in most of my videos. So thanks again. It's tea time, second breakfast time. I'll see you in the next one.